Hi, so in this video, we're going to go over one of the most important topics in AP Computer Science A, and as well as for understanding the Java programming language, which is classes, objects, and methods. So we've got our slides here, we've got our code editor, and let's jump right into it. So in the last video, we talked about data types for variables. So we had integers, we had strings, we had booleans, we had doubles. So those are basic data types. We almost call them, I think they're called primitive data types. That's the fancy vocab word for them. Classes are how you define, as a programmer, more advanced data types that include multiple variables. So it's kind of like, almost think about it as you're creating a super variable. So let's read some definitions here. When you make a class, you are making a new data type. Classes have attributes, so variables. So that's what I'm talking about. It's super variable. You're combining together multiple variables. But it's not just combining together multiple variables. You also create what are called methods. And methods are little pieces of code. And then there's this vocab word call, which we'll get into. So you're defining kind of a new piece of data that has some attributes, so some data associated with it, as well as some things that you can do with it in your code. So for these slides, for this video, we're going to go through the person class every single time. So we'll get into exactly the syntax and how it works, but you can have a person class, and you can define what are called objects. So variables who have the type of a given class are called objects. So much vocab, and there's kind of so many interchangeable things here, but on this first line of code, person Charlie equals new person. Charlie is both a variable in Java because it's got a type, person, it's got a name, and then we initialize it with the value of a new person. So it is a variable, but we also, because it's an object, or because it's an instance of a class, that's what we call it. Oh my gosh, there's so much vocab. But because Charlie, we assigned it the value of a person, person is a class. This makes Charlie an instance of that class, and another word for an instance of a class is an object. So, just a lot of vocab, and there's a lot of synonyms, and kind of you'll notice throughout this video that I'll switch back and forth between saying the different synonyms here depending on kind of what's most natural. So, this is a really big vocab intensive topic. But one of the things that I always think about when I'm teaching or when I'm learning new stuff is think about the examples, and can you understand the code examples? Worry a little bit less about the vocab. It is good to get fluent with the vocab, but there's so much here that it can get overwhelming. Try and focus on the examples. So this is a slide with no examples really, but it has some definitions. So instance variables are pieces of data. So here's some examples. So for a person class, and when you're defining a class, you can include whatever data you'd like as a part of creating your new data type. So in our person class, we could have their name, we could have their age. That's what we're going to use in this video. But we could also include their birthday, their favorite color, their favorite sport, whatever you want to do. And then methods are kind of verbs. So these are things that you can make your objects, make your instances of your class do. So a person can say hi, a person can walk to the store, a person can do homework. And the behavior, what your object, what your instance of your class can do depends on how you define your class. And so this is a really, 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 really key distinction. So there's kind of two things that go on with classes. And what I'll say first is, in a real software company, the reason they invented classes is so that they could split up work inside of big software companies. So, I mean, you're just getting started with Java, and you're not thinking about how to operate a 500-person software company. But this was a big innovation when they came up with this. Making classes was how they kind of allowed software engineers to split up their work. So they'd say that one person would implement this class, another person would implement this class, and then another person would write the main method that uses all of the methods from the other people's classes that they defined. So other people define classes to kind of like model different pieces of data, and then another person in their main method can call the methods from their classes. So definition is like, think about in a dictionary, right? A dictionary has a definition of a word, and then you use that word in a sentence. And so in Java world, you define a class, and then when you use that class, you're calling methods from that class. That's where you're using it in a complete sentence. These are definitions. Examples make it a lot more clear. But before we get into that, there are 3 different types of methods for us to think about. There are constructors, which create new instances of a class. So we already kind of saw an example of that. There are what are called void methods, which can change the instance variables or they can print stuff out. And then there are non-void methods, which return values from the class, and they can be used in some expression later in your code. So 3 different types of methods there. Okay, but the first one we need to go over is the constructor, because you can't really get anything done in your code without a constructor. So let's just take a moment to pause. So this Charlie is here on this line of code. From what we know from the first video in this series and from our beginning of Java, this is a variable. It has type person. The variable's name is Charlie and is initialized to have a value of a person object. Okay, so Charlie is a person object. So I'll read this sentence, because when I was teaching AP CSA, I had my students read this complete sentence like 10 times. And I individually checked that they could do this, and it's really hard to say this out loud. So let's see if I can even read it out loud. This line of code declares a variable called Charlie. Charlie is initialized with a new instance of the person class, which is created by calling the person constructor. That's a mouthful, okay? But it gets less bad when you start kind of coding. So let's see. So when you define methods, you create what's called a signature. That word doesn't really matter, but constructors are about setting up your class and setting up your objects with some, you remember how we initialized variables? Constructors are really for initializing an instance of a class, that is setting up all of their instance variables. So now we have a real example to dive into. This person class, it has an instance variable of a name, which is a string, and an instance variable of which is called an age, which is an integer. So each instance variable has a type and it has a name. Okay, just like regular variables, but they're included as a part of the class. So when you have this class, you're creating what I would kind of jokingly call a super variable. That's not a real vocab term. But you're creating a super variable with these 2 different instance variables inside. And then the purpose of the constructor is to initialize the values of these instance variables. Okay. So calling constructors. So now we can go actually over to the code editor, and we have this here. So I have included in my code editor, this is the Pickcode code editor, which is, you're on the Pickcode YouTube channel, by the way. But this is the Pickcode code editor, and we've got 2 files. We've got the person.java file, which defines the person class. And so we have the exact same code that we saw on the slide. We have the 2 instance variables, and then we have the constructor. I can put a line between this here. And then we have main.java. And main.java, it creates a new instance of the person class by calling the constructor. And here we have we're calling the constructor, and when you call a method, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but you include values for each of what are called the parameters. So this parameter is a string, and this parameter is an integer. And when we call the method, we provide to the method, as we're calling it, a string and an integer, and we do that in order. So this code does run, it doesn't do anything yet, because all we're doing is just making a new variable. So later in a couple seconds, we're going to make this code actually do something. Okay, so back to it here. So we call constructors. Okay, so geez Louise, here's some more vocab. But again, I wouldn't say like in one ear, out the other, forget about the vocab, but hear the vocab. You're going to use the vocab more and more throughout the year. Don't stress about perfectly being able to fluently describe every single line of Java code that you see with the exact perfect vocab. Focus on the examples. Focus on, can you kind of see how this all ties together, which hopefully some of the code examples in this video will help you get to. But There's so much vocab. It's my duty as an educator to explain all the vocab, but it's not mission critical for you to have a perfect grasp of all of the vocab on day one as you're just getting started. It's more important for you to kind of understand how the code ties together, which you will. It gets to be kind of intuitive. You'll get to it. So there are what are called the formal parameters, and the formal parameters are these things up here: string, person name, int, their age. Those are the each parameter, which is the thing inside the parentheses in the method here. These are set up, and they are basically like temporary variables used for the method. Constructors are weird, honestly. We'll get to other methods that are a little bit easier to understand in a second. So don't worry as much about the constructor, but you just do all this stuff, okay? So just for right now, just do all the stuff and trust that it'll work, and we'll get to more exciting bits in just a second. So the formal parameters are the names and types of the parameters as defined in that person.java file. The actual parameters are the values of the parameters when the method is called. So the key thing to remember is the formal and actual parameters need to match up by type, okay? And the order and the type matter. So we can do person Charlie equals new person with the string Charlie and the age 30. Okay, we can do that. We can't do this. So this is like, if there's one thing to remember about methods, if I could have you remember one thing here about everything I'm saying about parameters and all of this, this will not compile. I swear this will not compile. Okay. Incompatible types, int cannot be converted to string. The actual compiler error message isn't that helpful in Java. Yeah, no, thanks Java, but you get a compiler message. This is an error. Okay, you can't do this. You can do it the other way around. Okay, so the types, and the reason we have to do this is because in the constructor we defined it as saying string then int, not int then string. Okay, so when we call the constructor, we have to do string then int. We can't do int then string. Okay, very important. That's kind of almost the most important thing. Okay, so let's see. So calling other methods. So the constructor is just the one type of method, right? When we go back up to here, there are three types of methods. Constructor is the boring one, honestly, which is just to create a new instance of the class. Right? Like we call the constructor, and so far in our code editor, we called this constructor, we wrote all this code, and absolutely nothing has happened. This is a completely black area here. There's nothing printed out. There's nothing exciting happening, nothing getting calculated. Just doing the constructor by itself, you've only done like a third of the puzzle. It's not quite finished here. So in order to make our classes interesting and useful, we need to define other methods, and we need to call other methods in our main file. So let's do it. Let's add this say hi method to our person class. Okay, and I'll fix the indenting here, which I always have to do. So now this person has a constructor, so this person can be born into the world, and now we've defined how this person might greet people in the world. So we can go over here and we can say charlie.say hi. And so this is the syntax. You take the name of the variable with the dot after, and then the name of the method with the parentheses. And here we'll note that there are no formal parameters. Okay? There are 0 formal parameters required to call this method, which means that we put 0 actual parameters in the in the parentheses as we go to call the method. Okay, wow. So finally, we've actually managed to print something, and we are 14 minutes into the video, but we managed to print something out. So thanks for bearing with me. It gets better from here, I swear. Okay, so in main we wrote this, and lo and behold, we did actually print something out. Okay. So methods that change instance variables. So we can also do, as a part of our void methods, I guess I didn't explain why we call this a void method. Void means, well, we'll get to this in a second. I'm not going to actually define void right this second, but in main, we can call other methods, right? And so this method here that we're about to define, and I'm going to put in our person class, going over to the editor here, and we're going to add this method. Every time we add a method, we make the class more and more interesting. It can do more and more things. And so now in main.java, we can do charlie.change name to Charles. Okay. And then we can do this again. Okay. You see the difference here? And maybe we can make this a little bit more clear. We'll change my name to Bob. Or you know what? In the last video, we changed my name to Dog, which I thought was kind of funny. Okay. But it doesn't matter what we change it to. All right. So let's just kind of zoom through what happened. When we call the constructor, we assign this variable the value of this parameter person's name, okay, which in the original example was Charlie. Okay, it's all set up. So when we say hi, this print statement uses the initialized value of the variable, which was Charlie. Okay. Then we call this method change name with this actual parameter of dog. And you'll see that this does an assignment to the variable. It changes the value of the variable. And then finally, we can do say hi again. Okay. So you can call methods as many times as you want. You can only call the constructor once per object, but you can call the other methods as many times as you want. So maybe just to clarify that point, we can do this like 5 times, whatever. Okay. And every time we use it after that, right, it's going to use the most up-to-date value of the name instance variable. So we've got this back to here. Okay. Whew. All right. Another example. So we just want to get kind of more and more complicated here because the more and more that you add to your class, the more and more things your objects can do, and the more interesting the code is that you can actually write inside of your main file. So I'm going to add this method, which prints out a statement about me going to some sort of store or a person. We can have as many people as we'd want. Okay. And let's see. Let's get this indenting right. So now there's a go to store method. It has formal parameters. We want to keep using the vocab. It has formal parameters of string and int. Okay. And the purpose of this is that it's actually just going to print out this message that uses the parameters. So it uses the store parameter here, and then it uses the time parameter here. And fancy vocab word, we're concatenating some strings and some variable or some parameters here. So these are not called variables anymore when they're in the parentheses inside of a method. These things up here, store and time, are called parameters, but they still have a type and a name. So they're kind of different than variables, but similar, related. And just to make it more clear, right? Let's add this charlie.go-to-store. Is Chipotle a store? I don't know, but I went to Chipotle yesterday, got a burrito. Okay. I will go to Chipotle at 7. Okay. We messed up the spacing there. So let's fix up our method and let's see. I'll go to Chipotle at 7. Okay. And we could also I could go to CVS, which is right next door. I'll go to CVS at 8. It's going to take me an hour to get from Chipotle to CVS, which is not true. In Cambridge, where I live, the Chipotle is right next to the CVS. So just for what it's worth. Okay. Whew. Okay. So that's some examples of calling some different methods. We're almost done. We're on side 12 of 13. So thanks for bearing with me. And this is very important stuff, a lot of vocab, but hopefully the examples are making it clear where it's like, yeah, we just got some variables. They're in different files. We're changing their values. We're using their values. We're printing stuff out. It's all good. Focus on the examples, and can you understand the examples, and can you write code and predict what that code's going to do and make code that does good stuff? If you can do that, you're feeling good. Don't worry as much about the vocab. The vocab will come later. Okay. So a method can have a return type. Okay. So returning a value from a method, you use this return keyword. And that means that later on in your code, you can call the method, but you can use the return value in an expression. This is probably one of the things that people get mixed up with the most in programming. I've taught AP CSA. I've also taught a lot of, when I was in college, I was a teaching assistant, and I taught a lot of intro to programming with classes and objects and methods. and people will get this mixed up a ton. So maybe it won't totally land the first time you do it, but let's see if this example makes sense. So we are going to add to our person class this method, which we forgot to add public to it, which we will. And at some point we'll go over public and private, probably in a later unit. But for right now, we'll put public there because that's what we're supposed to do. Public int get age as dog, and we're going to take our age instance variable and divide by 7. So, my dog is 4 years old. You would say that they're 28 in dog years. If I'm 30 years old, I'm actually 4 in dog years. I think that's how it works. So me and my dog are the same age in dog years. I think that's basically how it works. And so let's see how that all goes here. So let's see. In main, we can now do this. And let's check it out. In main, we can do this. And okay. Let's get our spacing fixed up. This person, and then we need our semicolon. Okay. This person is 4 if they were a dog. Okay. And so just to make it extra clear, let's make a person called, so Serena Williams was another example that I used. Serena Williams is a tennis player. Okay. All right. We've determined that Serena Williams is 43 years old. So Serena is 43. And let's check this out. We haven't done anything, but we can do this. Oh, I did Charlie.getAge as dog. So I need to do Serena Williams.getAge as dog. And Serena Williams is 6 if there were a dog. Okay. So you can have multiple objects in the same main file, and the variables and everything that's going to get used and everything that's going to get returned is going to be based on the different objects that you have and the different objects that exist inside of your program here. Okay. So the summary here. Okay. So we did a lot of different stuff in this video, but we have a summary, and hopefully this will help. So constructors are for making a new instance of a class. They have the same name as a class. They can have as many parameters as you need, and you call them using the new keyword. That was the special thing about constructors. And you can only call them once per object. Void methods can have any name, and they can have any parameters. And the reason you have a void method is that they are going to print stuff, or they're going to change the value of an instance variable. And the reason you call them void, finally, we're getting to this. The reason you call them void means we're not going to return anything. So when I say non-void methods, that means any method that is declared that doesn't use the word void. Void, when you declare the methods, means we're not returning anything. And so if the method is declared as void, not going to return anything. If the method is declared with a return type of int or string or double or Boolean, that means that we are planning on returning something. And in fact, we have to return something for Java to let us compile our code. So, or for things to work properly. So non-void methods have a return type, and the return value is can be used in expressions in main. And in here, I'll note that I used classes, and all of the classes I created objects and instances of the classes inside of main. You can get fancier, and you can do classes inside of classes and do all sorts of stuff. But for right now, we're just going to make our classes in one file and call the methods and create instances of those classes inside of main. And that's probably what you'll do for now as well. So 13 slides, and maybe 24 minutes later, we've gotten through all of it, and we wrote a lot of code. And so I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.